And all of this is posted on the All-Star team. I was very transparent. We lived in a glass house for the last 90 days. Everything that went right, I touted, I shared, I showed how it worked, and everything that broke, I was very clear. I didn't hide anything other than the actual name of Pandora. Like everything else is out in the open.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Well, my friends, the question on the table was simple, yet profoundly important and complicated at the same time. The goal: can one appraiser make more than $100,000 a year, work less than 40 hours per week, and do so without any staff, with AI, of course, being the engine? Well, folks, if you stick around to the end, I'm not only going to tell you what the outcome of Project Prometheus was, but I've got a special bonus that you are going to want to stick around for. I promise you that. Okay, let's just get right to it. I'm going to answer the question right up front because this is the question burning on everyone's mind. Did Project Prometheus come out as a success? The answer is yes, but with a caveat. Stick with me. What is the caveat? Well, again, if the goal was to make $100,000 a year, work less than 40 hours a week, and do so without staff, and to do so with AI running 100% of the back office, then I guess we failed. Okay, I'll own it, if you will. If the goal was to learn what is possible, which in the beginning of this, when we started this March 1st of 2026, remember, OpenClaw was a brand new thing. Really, agentic AI, at least progressive agentic AI for consumer use, is still a pretty new thing, right? Did I take a bit of a risk to say, I think that OpenClaw can run your whole back office? Sure, absolutely. I'll own that 100%. If the process was to experiment and see what's possible and to develop tools that appraisers can use along the way, well, I think we had a resounding success. Let me walk through the process of Project Prometheus, and then we are going to get to the details as to what worked and what didn't. And the reason we want to do this is because you, as a consumer of this material, of this information, are going to want to know what worked and what didn't so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, that being said, even the places that we failed does not necessarily mean it's because the technology failed. But if we failed, it was for multiple reasons. And sometimes it's just a matter of not knowing what I don't know. I've, from the very beginning, remember, have been very clear about the fact that I am not in any way a coder, right? I don't write computer programs. I'm not a software engineer. I've never written a line of code in my life. And that was kind of the point, because we were out to answer the question, can a regular Joe Schmo like me, a clown with a microphone, develop and use a system that can save me time, can save me money, can mostly save me on payroll, because this agentic AI system can run the office? That's a big question, right? Big question mark there. Again, it was an experiment for a reason. I did not know the answer to the question. I really didn't. Now, I had an idea of where we might turn out, and my idea of where we might turn out is actually not very far from where we got. So we started out with OpenClaw because OpenClaw, as you remember, came out the end of January 2026. By mid-February, I was using it. So around February 15th is when I set mine up. Doug helped me set mine up. And then by about the third week in February, I had decided that this is an experiment worth doing. I was so impressed with what OpenClaw could do that I was pretty confirmed that it could be a success. This experiment of being able to replace your office staff so that you can focus on tier 3 appraisal work and everything else can be assigned to the agentic AI. Okay. So OpenClaw was our harness of choice. Harness is a word that basically describes the scaffolding that you can build the AI around. Within that harness, you can switch out different models. We started with Opus. I think at the time it was 4.6 and it quickly moved to 4.7. There were some pros and cons about that. The biggest con was that Opus is super expensive to use. And we were using it as a subscription to begin with. And then Anthropic said, no way, no how, you got to use API, which basically means you go from paying a certain amount for a certain amount of usage per month to whatever you use, you pay for. Okay, pay as you go kind of a thing. And the pay as you go model with Anthropic's more heavy models like the Opus models are not cheap, right? To put tokens in and to bring tokens out. And all that means is to ask questions and to get answers back or to have it do something. Those all take tokens. In the world of AI, that is the money, right? And that's where you pay out the nose. And from the very beginning, folks, the honest truth is we had problems. OpenClaw was a challenge from the beginning. I think because it was the first, it was probably a little light on the build. It was loosey-goosey. There were some problems with security. We were very careful about the way that we set it up so that it was completely siloed, that there was a moat around it. We never gave it a credit card. We never gave it a bank account. We never gave it a Stripe account. We never allowed it to touch the money on purpose. Okay. But there were issues from the very beginning. And I'm gonna go back to, as a coach, I've been using this term for a very long time, for over a decade. I've been talking about what I call the 82% rule. Now, it's a bit of a play on the 80-20 rule, but it makes it easier to remember. 82% of the time, OpenClaw was great. And it was mind-blowing, right? All the time. 18% of the time, it was also mind-blowing, but but mind-imploding, like frustration. It was something that I've never in my life, sitting in front of a computer more times during the week, have said, holy crap, I can't believe it did that. And holy crap, I can't believe it did that. And those have two very different meanings, right? 18% of the time I wanted to scream, and if I had hair, I'd pull it out. But 82% of the time it blew my mind. And I will just start with this, folks. OpenClaw and agentic AI in general is absolutely miraculous. It is incredible what it can do. Proactively, agentically, on its own, in other words, it is mind-blowing. And then the things that it forgot, the broken loops, you just did this yesterday and I told you not to do it. Why'd you do it again? You know, those things were super, super frustrating. Okay. And so as we were moving through this process of using OpenClaw, they were, as you know, if you've been following this video series, you know about, 50 days in to this 70-day project, I moved to a very different model. Not that I changed the harness, although I considered that. There were times that I considered going to Hermes. There was times that I considered switching out of a harness completely and building my own through Claude Code. I've got friends that have done that. And in the end, I decided to stick with what we started with, both for the experiment process and just because it's a 90-day process. If it had not been a 90-day experiment, I probably would have switched. That's just the honest truth. I just didn't have time halfway through or 50 days into it to say, okay, Let's take everything that we've built over here and try to rebuild it in a different harness. That just was not probably doable. And also for the science part of this, that would have been my excuse as to why it didn't work. And I didn't want that. I just wanted this to be as pure an experiment as possible. So I ended up sticking with OpenClaw, but the thing that I changed, and there's a whole video on this earlier in the series, is instead of having OpenClaw build and fix OpenClaw, I decided to get an external model to do it. Okay. And the external model that I used was Claude Code. Claude Code came in, and the analogy that I used in the previous video is using OpenClaw to build and fix itself is much like having a homeowner, while they're living in the process, completely build and remodel their own home. Doesn't work very well. The better approach is going to be to spend a little bit more money and get a general contractor, somebody who does this regularly, someone this is their wheelhouse, right? Remodels and building, and bring that person in. You vacate, right? While they remodel the house, and then you move back in a week later, right? That's the better way to do this. Now, it's not a perfect analogy, but you get the idea. Having Opus 4.7 working through Claude Code was like having a general contractor come in, and basically I connected that to OpenClaw so it could build, it could detect problems and fix problems, and it worked swimmingly to an extent. We still had issues, we still had hiccups, and I want to talk about those issues, and I want to talk about those hiccups now. But first, I want to remind you that we are sponsored by a couple of awesome companies here at the Appraiser Coach Podcast, and one of them is Working RE Magazine. You know what's interesting about Working RE? There's never a dull moment. When I say they are on top of what's going on with the appraisal world, I'm telling you folks, they are on top of what's going on with the appraisal world. And even down to what we're talking about today, and that is AI. If you are following Working RE, you're getting updates on how AI is changing the appraisal industry. And folks, why shouldn't you be getting their updates? Because they're free. Go to workingre.com and sign up for their free newsletter. That's workingre.com. We, of course, are sponsored here by TrueTracks. TrueTracks is the ability to be able to, support your adjustments using an incredible software that is so cost-effective that it is a freaking no-brainer. I do not understand how people can look at TrueTracks and not sign up. If it's in your area, you should be using it, period. End of story. No more to tell here. By the way, if you use the code Appraiser Coach, that's capital A, capital C, no space, you will get TrueTracks for free for 6 full weeks. That is that's a month. I can do math. That is a month and a half for free. Check it out by going to truefootage.tech/tools. Again, truefootage.tech/tools. So what worked? We've got Project Prometheus. The idea is, can a single appraiser make over $100,000 a year? Now, some of you are like, well, you didn't try it for a year, Dustin. How would you know? Well, because you can break $100,000 down into 1 month or even into 52 weeks. I mean, you can do the math, right? And by the way, Pandora was able to make that money. Okay, so check. One appraiser, check. She didn't hire any other appraisers during this process. Okay, and do so without staff. This is the part that didn't quite meet the level that we thought it would. Okay, so what ended up happening, and by the way, I'll get to the details here in just a little bit about what could work and what couldn't work just perfectly. But before I do so, I want to share with you what we did build, okay, how this process worked. And the process worked like this. We were able to create, again, non-coder here, just a guy playing with AI. I would call myself an enthusiast at best. We were able to create a process to where a new order would come in to Pandora's email box. The AI would recognize it as a new order, It could read every engagement letter. It didn't matter if it was a private appraisal. It did not matter if it was a VA appraisal, an FHA appraisal, a drive-by, a 1004, a UAD, a 1004 UAD, and it didn't matter what client it came from, by the way. And you all know, you've been in this world long enough to know that every engagement letter is different. It was able to read engagement letters, pull out the fee, the due date, the client, the lender, the contact, the phone numbers, the borrower, the purpose of the loan, you name it. Like all of the stuff that you spend time or one of your staff spends time parsing, right? We were able to allow the agent to do that, and it did it very well. That's one of the tools that worked pretty much perfectly every single time. Now, it took some tweaking at first, but we got it to the point that it was working every single time. It would take all of that data and put it in a spreadsheet. That was cool in and of itself. It would know that this is a borrower name. It goes in this field. This is the fee. It goes in this field. It, by the way, was able to tell the difference between an appraisal fee and the overall fee, like the gap being the AMC fee. So it might say, appraisal fee 700, AMC fee 300, total fee 1,000. It knew where to look for the appraisal fee and put that in the right field. It was then able to go out and do what we call the county scraper. Okay. That's when it would go out and it would notice what county it's in, right? It would recognize that. It would go out to the county website, and it could usually, we had some trouble with this, it could usually go to the right place to get the owner name, the previous deeds, parcel number, legal description, tax amount, sometimes the plat map, the sketch, if there was one, GIS, was able to take a screenshot of the GIS. This is all done behind the scenes, folks. All the stuff that you're going to normally do yourself or have someone else do for you. And then it was able to take all that data, put it in a work file in a Google Drive folder is what we used. And then it was able to take all that data, and now we were able to build a Zap tool, right, which allowed us to get into a la mode through the front door, if you will, and fill out all of that information, right? So it knew on a 1004 where the borrower's name is. Not only that, it knew that it needed to be a 1004. It knew the difference between a 1004 UAD and a 1004 UAD for VA. Like, that's how good it was. We were able to build out SMS tools, so texting tools that could send out a notice. This is one we struggled with the most. We ended up not using it because there was so much fear of error, right? Sending out the wrong text, saying the wrong thing. But we got it working to where it could text the contact, and after some input from Pandora. By the way, Pandora is our anonymous appraiser, a real appraiser. Her name isn't Pandora, but that's the name she's gone by for this experiment. But she was able to look at the text and approve it or not approve it. So the agentic AI would say, you have a new appraisal. It's at 123 Any Street, and I think Wednesday between 2 and 4 would be perfect. Can I send out the text? And if she hit yes, it could send a text to the contact and say, hey, this is Pandora, and I work for X amount appraisal office, and we would like to come Wednesday between 2 and 4 to do this appraisal. Would that be okay? Something like that. Okay. We were able to build out a voice agent. We never used the voice agent, just to be clear, but we were able to build one out. A photo checking tool, right, to actually look at quality and condition. Depreciated cost calculator. A neighborhood and reconciliation writer, right, to basically take your grid, and then it could write all of the explanation for the grid. One of the coolest tools was a 133-point checklist that you could send the report through before it went out the door to the client, so that you can avoid revisions because you took care of them before you sent it off. Game changer. And then, of course, if you did get a revision, we have a revision writer as well, that you could take the revision from the email, the PDF of the appraisal, and let it do its job. Find out, is this an accurate revision? What are the suggestions? How should we remove it? How should we write and address the client on the addendum at the end of the report? Right? So basically tools that Pandora, or what most offices would either do themselves or have a virtual assistant do. Now, here's the caveat. Here's the 18%. Here's the part that the naysayers are going to say, see, Dustin, you failed. We couldn't totally trust it. We found often that we would fix something today and it felt like it was broken the next day. And we would do this loop constantly and go through this process constantly, and it was frustrating, very frustrating, okay? Now, I have outlined all of the problems that we had. I was very clear. If you followed the video series, you can go back through and all of this is posted on the All-Star team. I was very transparent. We lived in a glass house for the last 90 days. Everything that went right, I touted, I shared, I showed how it worked, and everything that broke, I was very clear. I didn't hide anything other than the actual name of Pandora. Like everything else is out in the open. Now, a lot of stuff I couldn't show on the screen because of the anonymity, and there was just too much stuff that would pinpoint back to who she was. And by the way, that was my recommendation, not hers. She didn't come to me and say, "Hey, I'll do it if I can remain anonymous." I said, I don't want this to be sabotaged. I've got enough naysayers out there that I don't want your business to be hurt because you're part of this experiment. So we ended up keeping her anonymous. But she was a trooper, and she was so patient, and sometimes we would be up at 10 o'clock at night, and I would be, sending her messages saying, "Okay, try it again. Let's do this again. I think I fixed it this time," right? Um, Now, if you wanna say that we failed, I'll own that label. Oh, alright, we failed. I've jokingly talked about this project as not just maybe Project Prometheus, but maybe Project Icarus, okay? Icarus, of course, flew too close to the sun and ended up dying. I don't think our wings melted on this. I really don't. I think they got a little warm, so we kind of flew a little bit sideways, but I would not call this Project Icarus. I would definitely call this Project Prometheus with a caveat. Folks, we built out some real tools. These are tools that are usable, okay? And I promised from the beginning that I would make all of the blueprints available to the All-Star team, and I have all of the transparency. And by the way, we've saved all of that. If you're coming in late to the game and you think, "Oh, golly, did I miss all of that?" No, they're all there. There's 20 plus videos in this series that go through not just videos, but transcripts of videos, descriptions of videos, and downloadables. Okay? The whole course has been organically built along the way, right? Subscribe and follow along. We've got full descriptions, full transcripts that you can copy and paste into AI. We've got blueprints in the form of downloadable programs and also prompt instructions. In fact, most of these that I'm about to share with you are prompt instructions. And the reason for that is number one, I'm not a software developer. I didn't want to put out an executable, right? That you just download, click it, and it works, right? I know that sounds great, but in the world of AI, it doesn't ever work that way. And I don't want to be tech support. The better approach here, by the way, my setup is different than your setup. So even if I did package up what we were doing and give it to you, you would find that it wouldn't work very well because it's set up for my computer. I'm not Microsoft, right? I'm not Google. I'm not setting up systems that are going to run on your computer because you run the same system that I run. That's not what we do here. But I promised you that if you waited till the end that I was going to give you something, okay? As a member of the All-Star team, I'm giving out all of the tools that we built. Again, most of them are prompt instructions so that you can download and just go step 1, step 2, step 3. We made it as easy as possible. But the following tools are now available for the All-Star team. Number 1, depreciated cost calculator, okay? Not a Solomon replacement. Okay, if you want to do a real depreciated cost calculator, go to my friend Scott Cullen. He's got a great one. This is a light version, if at best. Okay, but it works. Depreciated cost calculator. 133 step QC reviewer. Revision response writer. Engagement letter parser. Photo quality checker. Neighborhood narrative builder, reconciliation narrative writer, and there's others as well. Those are the main ones. So where do we go from here? Well, folks, we keep building. My commitment is to you that I am going to continue to lead on the cutting edge of AI. I'm going to continue to learn. I'm going to continue to, to admit my weaknesses, but I will continue to learn and experiment and share and help others where I can. I hope that you will follow me along the journey. Here at the All-Star team, we've got multiple ways to do that. A community circle inside a private community only for members that all we talk about is artificial intelligence, what we're learning, what we're failing on, what we're experiencing, questions like I've run into this problem, help me out. That's all happening in our community. I've got the AI Appraiser Academy that runs every single month where we literally build it together online. And then I've got continued workshops, both online and in person. So I encourage you to follow along. Folks, let's build tools for appraisers that work together. Ultimately, what I learned in this experiment is don't let your assistant go yet. Okay. In fact, I don't know that you're ever going to need to let your assistant go. In my opinion, what AI is going to do is not replace the appraiser and not even necessarily replace the virtual assistant. Maybe it'll keep you from hiring more, but I don't think you need to fire anybody. What I'm doing with my assistants is elevating them from data entry clerk to AI director, right? Allow the AI to do the data entry, but you, as the human in the loop, can now watch over and help that AI to become better. That's what Pandora did. She never actually benched her assistant, okay? Because to do so would have meant that she would be the human in the loop. We could never get to the point yet. Maybe it's coming, but currently AI, at least for us, was not to a level that we could have without Silicon Valley money and a real, MIT engineering mind. It's just not there for the average Joe Schmo to be able to replace the staff and allow the appraisal office to run itself. So that's where we ended up. Those were the lessons learned. I invite you, if you've not done so already, start in the beginning. AI is moving fast, but the videos are very relevant. Even the ones that we recorded 90 days ago are still very relevant to this process. If you are interested in AI at least a little, I encourage you to be involved. It is an amazing thing. It is changing the world that we live in, and appraisers are not exempt from that. Our lives, our careers, our industry, our day-to-day and daily life is going to change dramatically. And I promise, if you are going to be successful as a real estate appraiser, you're not going to be able to do it without AI in your corner. Thank you for this lovely experience. Special thanks to Pandora. Thank you. She was so patient through this whole thing. There were times I'm sure she wanted to give up. I'm sure there was times she was like, Dustin, how many times do I got to be up till 11 o'clock, working on this with you, and it still doesn't work? Thank you, Pandora. Your sacrifice is appreciated. Thanks all of you for joining me for this project, and we'll continue to build. Here we go.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.